Era Martinez stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her worn-out uniform for what felt like the 100th time. The fabric was faded, patches barely holding on, and the boots had seen better days. At 17, she looked more like a lost child playing dress-up than a member of the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps. Her classmates at Westfield High School had made sure she knew exactly what they thought of her military aspirations. Military freak, they would whisper as she walked down the hallways. Sarah thinks she's some kind of soldier. Others would laugh. The popular kids, led by Madison Campbell and her boyfriend Jake Reynolds, never miss an opportunity to remind Sarah of her place in the school's social hierarchy, dead last. Sarah's family lived in a small apartment on the wrong side of town. Her mother, Carmen, worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and pay rent. Her father had left when Sarah was 12, taking with him any sense of financial stability the family had. The Martinez family was one of the poorest in the school district, and everyone knew it. While other students drove to school in cars their parents bought them, Sarah walked 3 miles each morning. While they wore designer clothes and carried expensive backpacks, Sarah made do with hand-me-downs from the local thrift store. Her JROC uniform was the only thing she owned that made her feel proud, even if it earned her endless ridicule. The mockery wasn't limited to her clothing or financial situation. Sarah's academic performance was average at best. She struggled with reading comprehension due to an undiagnosed learning disability, and mathematics seemed like a foreign language to her. Teachers often overlooked her, assuming she wasn't college material. Her guidance counselor had even suggested she consider vocational training instead of pursuing higher education. "Sarah, honey, maybe you should think about something more realistic," Mrs. Peterson had said during their last meeting. "The military is very competitive, and with your grades," the sentence hung in the air, unfinished but crystal clear in its meaning. But Sarah had a dream that burned brighter than all the criticism and doubt surrounding her. Every morning, she would wake up an hour early to study military history, strategy, and leadership principles. She checked out library books about famous generals and read them by flashlight under her covers when her mother thought she was sleeping. Names like Patton, MacArthur, and Schwarzkopf became her heroes, their stories fuel for her determination. The JROTC program at Westfield High was small and underfunded. Colonel Harrison, a retired Army officer in his 60s, ran the program with minimal resources and even less support from the school administration. Most students who joined JROTC were either forced into it by parents or looking for an easy credit. Sarah was different. She took every drill seriously, memorized every regulation, and treated each uniform inspection like it was a matter of life and death. "Martinez has heart," Colonel Harrison would tell his wife over dinner. "More heart than the rest of them combined." But heart doesn't always translate to success in the real military. She's got a long road ahead of her. The other JROTC students weren't much kinder to Sarah than the general population. They saw her intensity as weird, her dedication as overcompensation for her obvious shortcomings. During drill practice, they would deliberately make mistakes when she was leading, causing her commands to fall apart, and resulting in punishment for the entire unit. "Thanks a lot, Martinez," they would grumble after Colonel Harrison made them do extra push-ups. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with playing soldier, we wouldn't all suffer." Sarah absorbed the criticism in silence. She had learned early in life that fighting back only made things worse. Instead, she channeled her pain and frustration into her training. She would stay after school to practice drill movements alone in the gymnasium. She would run laps around the track until her lungs burned and her legs shook. She was building herself into something stronger, something better, even if nobody else could see it yet. The social dynamics at Westfield High were brutal and clearly defined. At the top sat the popular kids, athletes, cheerleaders, and students from wealthy families. Madison Campbell was their unofficial queen, a blonde cheerleader whose father owned the largest car dealership in town. She was beautiful, confident, and cruel in the way that only teenagers could be. Her boyfriend Jake Reynolds was the star quarterback, headed to State University on a full athletic scholarship. Below them were the various cliques and groups, the drama kids, the band nerds, the goths, the stoners. Each group had its place in the carefully maintained social order. And at the very bottom, in a category all her own, was Sarah Martinez. She didn't fit anywhere, didn't belong to any group, and had no allies to speak of. The bullying wasn't always overt. Sometimes it was subtle, conversations that stopped when she walked by, invitations that were pointedly not extended, group projects where she was always the last one chosen. Other times it was more direct. Madison and her friends would make comments about Sarah's military obsession loud enough for her to hear. "I heard she sleeps in her uniform," Madison would say with fake concern. "That's so weird. Like, who does that? Maybe she thinks if she plays soldier long enough, someone will actually take her seriously," Jake would add, causing his friends to burst into laughter. The worst incident happened during lunch period in the spring of Sarah's junior year. She was sitting alone, as usual, eating a sandwich she had made at home and reading a biography of General Eisenhower. Madison approached her table with her usual entourage trailing behind. "Oh my God, Sarah, are you really reading about dead generals again?" Madison said, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Don't you think it's time to live in the real world?" "I'm just eating lunch," Sarah replied quietly, not looking up from her book. "No, seriously, I'm trying to help you here," Madison continued, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Everyone's talking about how weird you are. Maybe if you stop pretending to be G.I. Jane and try to be normal, people might actually like you." Sarah's hands tightened around her book, but she remained silent. She had learned that engaging with Madison only made things worse. The popular girl interpreted Sarah's silence as permission to continue. "I mean, look at yourself." Madison gestured dramatically at Sarah's appearance. "Those clothes, that weird military stuff, the way you march around like you're somebody important. Newsflash, Sarah, you're nobody. You're going to graduate, maybe join the military if they'll take you, and spend your life taking orders from people who are actually important." The cafeteria had gone quiet. Everyone was watching the scene unfold, some with amusement, others with uncomfortable curiosity. A few students looked like they wanted to intervene, but nobody did. Nobody ever did. "You know what I think?" Madison leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the silent room. "I think you're living in some kind of fantasy where you matter. But you don't, Sarah. You never will." Sarah closed her book slowly and stood up. For a moment, Madison looked uncertain, as if she thought she might have pushed too far. But Sarah simply picked up her lunch and walked away, her head held high despite the burning shame in her cheeks. The cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level, but the damage was done. The incident would be talked about for weeks. That night, Sarah sat on her bed staring at her JROTC awards and certificates. They weren't much. A few ribbons for perfect attendance, a certificate for completing a leadership course, a trophy for winning the school's military knowledge competition. To most people, they would seem insignificant. But to Sarah, they represented something more. They were proof that she was capable of excellence, even if nobody else recognized it. Her mother knocked on the door and entered with a cup of tea. Carmen Martinez was a small, tired-looking woman who worked as a hotel housekeeper during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. She rarely had time for long conversations with her daughter, but she sensed that Sarah was struggling more than usual. "Mija, are you okay? You seemed upset when you came home." Sarah looked at her mother and felt a wave of protectiveness wash over her. Carmen had sacrificed so much, worked so hard to keep their small family afloat. Sarah didn't want to add to her mother's burdens by complaining about school problems. "I'm fine, Mom, just thinking about the future." Carmen sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her daughter's collection of military memorabilia. "You know, when your father left, I was so angry. Angry at him, angry at the world, angry at myself for not being enough to make him stay. But you, Mija, you've never been angry. You've always been determined. That's a gift." "It doesn't feel like a gift," Sarah admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if everyone else is right. Maybe I'm just fooling myself." Her mother took her hand. "Listen to me, Sarah. I've cleaned hotel rooms for 10 years. I've seen rich people, poor people, famous people, nobodies. You know what I've learned? The ones who talk the loudest about how important they usually aren't. And the ones who work quietly, who don't give up when things get hard. Those are the ones who change the world. But what if I'm not smart enough? What if I can't make it in the military? Smart comes in different forms. Mija, you might not be the fastest at reading or the best at math, but you understand things about leadership and determination that those other kids will never learn. Don't let them make you forget who you are." After her mother left, Sarah pulled out a notebook where she kept her goals and plans. At the top of the first page, she had written, "United States Military Academy, West Point." It seemed impossible, laughable even. Her grades were mediocre, her family had no connections, and she had no money for test prep or application fees. But she had researched every requirement, every step of the application process, every possible path to admission. She knew she needed to improve her grades dramatically. She needed to score high on the SATs. She needed leadership experience and community service. Most importantly, she needed a nomination from a member of Congress, something that seemed as likely as winning the lottery for a poor girl from Westfield. But Sarah had something that couldn't be taught or bought, an unshakable belief that she belonged in the military, that she had something valuable to contribute to her country's defense. Every insult, every moment of mockery, every doubt from teachers and classmates only strengthened her resolve. She would prove them all wrong, not through words, but through actions. The rest of her junior year passed in a blur of studying, training, and preparation. Sarah signed up for every advanced course she could handle, even if it meant struggling through material that came easily to her classmates. She sought out Colonel Harrison for extra instruction in military history and leadership principles. She volunteered at local veterans organizations and participated in community service projects. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Her grades improved from C's to B's, and occasionally even A's. Her SAT scores, while not spectacular, were respectable. More importantly, she was developing the kind of character and work ethic that would serve her well in any endeavor. But none of this was visible to her classmates. To them, she was still the weird girl who played soldier, the poor kid who didn't belong. The social hierarchy at Westfield High remained unchanged, with Sarah firmly planted at the bottom. Even as she grew stronger and more confident, the perception of her as a loser remained fixed in everyone's minds. As junior year ended and senior year approached, Sarah faced her biggest challenge yet, the West Point application process. She would need to convince admissions officers, congressional nomination committees, and military evaluators that she belonged at one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. And she would have to do it while continuing to endure the daily humiliation of being seen as Westfield High's biggest failure. The stage was set for either the greatest triumph or the most crushing defeat of Sarah's young life. But one thing was certain, she would not give up. The girl who had been dismissed and mocked for years was preparing to show the world exactly what she was made of. The question was whether anyone would be paying attention when she did. Senior year arrived like a storm Sarah had been preparing for her entire life. While her classmates focused on prom themes and senior skip days, Sarah was consumed with a single goal, getting into West Point. The application process was more complex and demanding than anything she had ever attempted, but she approached it with the same methodical determination that had carried her through years of ridicule. The first hurdle was academic. Despite her improvements, Sarah's GPA was still only 3.2, respectable, but far below the 3.8 average of typical West Point cadets. She knew she couldn't change her past grades, but she could dominate her senior year courses. She enrolled in advanced placement classes despite warnings from counselors that she might be in over her head. Sarah, AP Physics, and AP History in the same semester. Mrs. Peterson shook her head during course registration. That's extremely ambitious for someone with your academic record. Maybe you should reconsider. But Sarah had done her research. She knew that West Point valued candidates who challenged themselves academically, even if they didn't achieve perfect grades. She would rather fail while reaching for excellence than succeed while playing it safe. The academic workload was crushing. While other students complained about having 2 hours of homework per night, Sarah was spending 4 to 5 hours studying after her part-time job at the local grocery store. She had taken a job to help her mother with expenses and to save money for application fees and test preparation materials. Every evening followed the same routine. She would come home from school, grab a quick snack, and head to work at Martinez Family Market, a small grocery store owned by distant relatives who had given her the job out of pity more than anything else. She stocked shelves, cleaned floors, and helped customers for 4 hours every weekday and 8 hours on weekends. Her coworkers, mostly older Hispanic men who had known her family for years, were kind but puzzled by her ambitions. "Mija, why you want to join the Army?" asked Roberto, a 60-year-old man who had immigrated from Mexico 30 years earlier. "The military is for boys, not smart girls like you." "It's not the Army, Mr. Roberto. It's West Point, the military academy. It's like a university, but for training military officers. Roberto would nod politely, but Sarah could see he didn't understand. To him, like to most people in her community, the military was something poor kids did when they had no other options. The idea that someone would choose a military career, especially someone with the intelligence to pursue other paths, was foreign. After work, Sarah would come home exhausted, but force herself to study until midnight or later. She read history textbooks by the light of a small desk lamp in her bedroom, trying not to wake her mother, who had to be up at 5 a.m. for her first job. She practiced physics problems on notebook paper because her family couldn't afford a scientific calculator. She wrote and rewrote essays for her college applications until her hand cramped. The social isolation at school became more pronounced as the year progressed. While other seniors bonded over shared experiences like college visits and scholarship celebrations, Sarah's path was lonely and largely misunderstood. When classmates talked about their college plans, Sarah would mention West Point and watch their expressions change from interest to confusion to barely concealed amusement. West Point, isn't that like super hard to get into? Asked Jenny Morrison, one of the few students who had ever spoken to Sarah civilly. Yes, very competitive, Sarah replied. But I thought you had to be like really smart and connected and stuff. Don't your parents have to be in the military or politics? The implication was clear, though Jenny probably didn't mean to be cruel. Someone like Sarah, poor, academically mediocre, with no family connections, had no business applying to such a prestigious institution. The conversation ended quickly, leaving Sarah feeling more isolated than before. Madison Campbell's cruelty had evolved as well. Now that graduation was approaching and college acceptance letters were arriving, she had new ammunition for her attacks. "Oh, Sarah, did you hear? I got into State University with a partial cheerleading scholarship," Madison announced loudly in the hallway between classes. "Where are you going to school next year?" "Community college." Sarah had learned to deflect these attacks, but they still stung. "I'm still waiting to hear back from some places." "Right, of course you are." Madison's smile was sharp as glass. "Well, I'm sure wherever you end up will be perfect for someone like you." The phrase "someone like you" had become Madison's favorite weapon. It carried all the weight of Sarah's perceived inadequacy, her poverty, her social status, her impossible dreams. But Sarah had begun to hear something different in those words. They were meant to diminish her, but instead, they reminded her of what made her unique. Someone like her didn't give up. Someone like her found a way. The congressional nomination process was perhaps the most intimidating part of the West Point application. Sarah needed a nomination from either her representative or one of her state senators. This typically involved a competitive application process, interviews, and competition against dozens of other qualified candidates, most of whom came from military families or had political connections. Sarah's representative was Congressman David Walsh, a moderate Republican who had held his seat for 12 years. His office was located in the state capitol, a 2-hour bus ride from Westfield. Sarah had written him a letter requesting an application for a Service Academy nomination, and, to her surprise, she received a package in the mail 3 weeks later. The nomination application was almost as complex as the West Point application itself. It required essays, recommendations, transcripts, and a personal interview. Sarah poured herself into the essays, writing about her leadership experiences in JROTC, her commitment to service, and her vision for her military career. The interview was scheduled for a Saturday morning in November. Sarah borrowed a suit from her mother's friend and took the early bus to the Capitol. The congressman's office was in a gleaming government building that intimidated Sarah from the moment she walked through the security checkpoint. The waiting room was filled with other candidates and their parents. Sarah immediately fell out of place. The other applicants were polished and confident, wearing expensive clothes and discussing their family's military traditions. Many had parents or grandparents who were military officers or academy graduates. One boy's father was a colonel. Another's grandfather had been an admiral. Sarah sat alone, clutching her folder of documents and trying not to feel overwhelmed by the competition. She listened to their conversations about summer camps at military bases, family friends who were West Point graduates, and SAT scores that were significantly higher than hers. Sarah Martinez? A staff member called her name, and she followed him down a hallway lined with photographs of the congressman with various military leaders and political figures. The interview panel consisted of 3 people: a retired Army general, a local businessman who was a Naval Academy graduate, and the congressman's chief of staff. They were polite, but professional, asking standard questions about her motivation for seeking a military career and her understanding of the commitment required. Miss Martinez, I see from your application that you don't have any family members who served in the military, the general observed. What sparked your interest in a service academy education? Sarah had prepared for this question, but sitting across from the decorated general, her rehearsed answer seemed inadequate. Instead, she spoke from the heart. Sir, I know I don't have a background that most candidates have. My family is poor, and I don't have connections in the military or politics. But I've been studying military history and leadership for years, and I believe I have something to contribute. I've seen what strong leadership can accomplish, and I've also seen what happens when leadership fails. I want to be part of the solution. That's a noble sentiment, the businessman interjected, but West Point is extraordinarily demanding, both academically and physically. What makes you think you can succeed when so many others fail? Sarah thought about all the nights she had studied until exhaustion, all the mornings she had woken up early to run before school, all the times she had been knocked down and gotten back up. Sir, I've been training for this my entire high school career, even when nobody believed in me. I might not be the smartest person in the room or the most connected, but I don't quit, ever. And I think that matters more than people realize. The interview lasted 30 minutes, and Sarah left feeling cautiously optimistic. She had been honest about her background and limitations while emphasizing her determination and work ethic. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. Meanwhile, her academic performance was improving dramatically. The AP classes that had seemed impossibly difficult in September were becoming manageable by December. Her physics teacher, Mr. Williams, was particularly impressed by her progress. Sarah, your last 3 test scores have been in the A range, he said after class one day. I have to admit, I was skeptical when you enrolled in AP Physics. Your math background didn't suggest you'd be successful, but you've proven me wrong. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I've been working really hard. It shows. In fact, I'd like to write you a letter of recommendation if you're applying to colleges. Where are you hoping to go? When Sarah mentioned West Point, Mr. Williams looked surprised but impressed. That's ambitious. Very ambitious. But if anyone can make it through the application process, through sheer determination, it's probably you. These small victories meant more to Sarah than her teachers realized. For years, she had been dismissed and underestimated by educators who saw her struggles with reading and math and assumed she lacked intelligence. But she was proving that intelligence came in many forms and that persistence could overcome natural ability. The West Point application itself was a massive undertaking. Beyond the academic requirements, she needed to complete physical fitness tests, undergo a medical examination, and participate in a rigorous interview process. The physical requirements were particularly challenging because Sarah didn't have access to a proper gym or fitness equipment. She improvised a training routine using what was available. She did push-ups and sit-ups in her bedroom, ran on the track at school before classes started, and used milk jugs filled with sand as weights. Colonel Harrison allowed her to use the school's small fitness room after JROTC meetings, but the equipment was old and limited. Despite these limitations, Sarah passed all the physical requirements. Years of self-imposed discipline and training had built her into an athlete, even if she didn't look like the typical female cadets who came to West Point with extensive sports backgrounds. The medical examination revealed one potential problem: Sarah's learning disability, which had never been formally diagnosed, but was discovered during the comprehensive testing required by the Academy. The reading comprehension issues that had plagued her throughout school were identified as dyslexia, a condition that could potentially disqualify her from admission. Sarah was devastated when she received the notification that her application was being reviewed for medical waiver consideration. All her hard work, all her preparation, could be undone by a condition she couldn't control. She researched dyslexia extensively and learned that many successful military officers had overcome similar challenges, but she also learned that the service academies rarely granted medical waivers. Christmas break arrived with Sarah's future hanging in the balance. While her classmates celebrated acceptance letters from various colleges, Sarah waited for word from West Point and from Congressman Walsh's office about the nomination. The uncertainty was agonizing, but she refused to consider backup plans. This was her dream, and she would pursue it until the very end. During the break, she received a call that would change everything. It was from Congressman Walsh's office, informing her that she had been selected as his primary nominee for West Point. The news was so unexpected that Sarah had to ask the staff member to repeat it twice. Miss Martinez, you are Congressman Walsh's primary nominee to the United States Military Academy at West Point. This means that if you receive an appointment from the Academy, you will be offered admission. Sarah hung up the phone and screamed with joy, causing her mother to come running from the kitchen in alarm. When Sarah explained what had happened, Carmen began crying tears of happiness and pride. Mija, I knew this day would come. I knew all that hard work would pay off. But the celebration was premature. Sarah still needed to receive an actual appointment from West Point, and her medical waiver request was still pending. The nomination was a crucial step, but it wasn't a guarantee of admission. January brought a new semester and intensified scrutiny from her classmates. Word had spread about Sarah's nomination, and the reaction was mixed. Some students were genuinely impressed and congratulatory. Others, particularly Madison and her circle, were skeptical and sometimes openly dismissive. I heard Sarah got some kind of nomination to West Point, Madison said loud enough for half the lunchroom to hear. I mean, anyone can get nominated. The real question is whether they'll actually accept someone like her. The phrase someone like her again, but this time Sarah felt its power differently. Yes, she was someone like her, someone who had overcome poverty, learning disabilities, and social rejection to earn a congressional nomination to one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. Someone like her was exactly what the country needed in its military leadership. As winter turned to spring, Sarah maintained her academic momentum while anxiously waiting for word from West Point. Her AP exam scores in May were the highest she had ever achieved on standardized tests. Her senior year GPA was 3.8, bringing her cumulative average up to 3.4. She was finishing strong, proving that her early struggles had been overcome through determination and hard work. But the waiting was becoming unbearable. Every day, she checked the mail hoping for a thick envelope from the academy. Other students were already planning for their college freshman years, while Sarah remained in limbo, unable to move forward with any certainty about her future. Then, on a warm day in early May, it happened. Sarah was working at the grocery store when her mother called her cell phone, which was unusual because Carmen knew Sarah's work schedule. Mija, you need to come home. Right now. There's a big envelope here from West Point. Sarah's hands began shaking. She asked her supervisor for permission to leave early and ran the 6 blocks home faster than she had ever run in her life. Her mother was waiting on the front steps, holding a thick white envelope with a West Point seal. I didn't want to open it without you, Carmen said, her voice trembling with emotion. Sarah took the envelope with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. This was it, either the culmination of years of dreams and hard work, or the crushing end of everything she had been working toward. She opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Miss Martinez, it is my pleasure to inform you that you have been selected for appointment to the United States Military Academy. Sarah didn't hear the rest of the letter. She was accepted. After years of being told she wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't the right kind of person for success, she had been accepted to one of the most elite institutions in the world. Her mother was crying and laughing at the same time, and Sarah felt a joy so pure and complete that she thought her heart might burst. The girl who had been mocked as the class loser was going to West Point. But her classmates didn't know it yet, and graduation was still 3 weeks away. Sarah decided to keep the news to herself for now. She wanted to savor this moment, this proof that all the doubters had been wrong, before sharing it with a world that had never believed in her. The stage was set for one of the most satisfying revelations in Westfield High School history. But Sarah was just getting started. West Point would be the beginning of her journey, not the end, and she already had her sights set on goals that would make her current achievement seem small by comparison. Graduation day at Westfield High School arrived with all the pomp and ceremony that small-town America could muster. The gymnasium was decorated with the school colors. Proud parents filled the bleachers with cameras and flowers, and the class of 2008 sat in neat rows wearing matching caps and gowns. For most students, this represented the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. For Sarah Martinez, it was her first public vindication. Sarah had kept her West Point acceptance secret for 3 weeks, sharing the news only with her mother and Colonel Harrison. She wanted to wait for the perfect moment to reveal what she had accomplished. That moment came during the awards ceremony that preceded the actual graduation. Principal Davis stood at the podium reading through various scholarships and special recognitions. Sarah half listened as Madison Campbell was announced as valedictorian and recipient of a cheerleading scholarship to State University. Jake Reynolds received recognition for his football scholarship and academic achievements. The usual suspects collected their expected accolades, while Sarah remained anonymous in her folding chair. And now, Principal Davis continued, we have a very special announcement. One of our students has achieved something truly extraordinary, earning admission to one of the most prestigious institutions in our nation. Sarah Martinez has been accepted to the United States Military Academy at West Point. The gymnasium fell silent. Sarah could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes turning toward her as she stood to acknowledge the recognition. The applause that followed was confused and scattered. Some parents clapped enthusiastically, some students looked shocked, and others, particularly Madison's group, appeared stunned into silence. Sarah walked to the podium to accept a special certificate from the principal, and she could hear whispered conversations throughout the crowd. Did he say West Point? Like the actual West Point? I thought that was only for really smart kids from military families. Sarah Martinez? Are you serious? Madison's face had gone pale. She was staring at Sarah, as if seeing her for the first time, trying to reconcile the class loser she had tormented for years with someone who had accomplished something she could never achieve. Jake looked equally confused, his usual confident smirk replaced by bewilderment. Sarah accepted her certificate and returned to her seat without fanfare. She had waited 4 years for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt surprisingly calm. The validation was sweet, but it was also just the beginning. West Point was not a destination. It was preparation for the real work ahead. After graduation, the traditional reception in the school cafeteria was awkward for Sarah. Students and parents approached her with a mixture of congratulation and curiosity. Many seemed genuinely pleased for her success, but others appeared to be struggling with cognitive dissonance. Sarah, I had no idea you were so smart, said Mrs. Henderson, whose daughter Katie had been in Sarah's AP physics class. West Point, that's just incredible. The implication was clear. They had all underestimated her so completely that her achievement seemed impossible rather than inevitable. Sarah graciously accepted congratulations while internally marveling at how people's perceptions could change so quickly. Yesterday, she was the weird girl who played soldier. Today, she was a West Point appointee. Madison finally approached her near the end of the reception, her usual entourage noticeably absent. Sarah, I heard about West Point. That's really amazing. For the first time in 4 years, Madison seemed uncertain, almost vulnerable. Her usual confidence had been shaken by the revelation that the girl she had dismissed so easily had accomplished something beyond her own reach. Thank you, Madison. I hope you do well at State. Sarah's response was polite, but not friendly. She felt no need to gloat or seek revenge, but she also wasn't about to pretend that 4 years of cruelty could be erased with a few awkward words of congratulation. I just want to say, Madison continued, I think I might have. We all I hope there are no hard feelings. It was as close to an apology as Sarah was likely to get, and it wasn't nearly enough. But Sarah had already moved beyond the need for Madison's approval or regret. I learned a lot from high school, Sarah replied simply. All of it was useful. Summer before West Point was a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah had to complete various administrative requirements, undergo additional medical examinations, and begin physical conditioning for the rigorous demands of Beast Barracks, the intensive 6-week training program that began each cadet's West Point experience. She also worked extra hours at the grocery store to save money for incidental expenses and to help her mother financially. Carmen was proud of her daughter's achievement, but worried about the years of separation ahead. Sarah would spend the next 4 years at West Point, with limited opportunities to come home. Are you sure this is what you want, Mija? Carmen asked one evening as they sat on their small apartment's front steps. It's such a hard life, and you'll be so far away. Mom, this is everything I've ever wanted. I know it will be difficult, but I'm ready for difficult. I've been training for this my whole life. Carmen nodded, understanding her daughter's determination, even if she didn't fully grasp the significance of West Point. To her, Sarah was simply the girl who had never given up on her dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. July arrived with blistering heat and the approach of R-Day, reception day, at West Point, when new cadets reported for duty. Sarah's goodbye to her mother at the bus station was tearful but brief. Both women knew that extended farewells would only make the separation harder. "Make me proud, Mija," Carmen whispered as she hugged her daughter goodbye. "I will, Mom. I promise." The bus ride to West Point took 8 hours, giving Sarah time to reflect on how far she had come and how much farther she intended to go. She was leaving behind everything familiar: her home, her family, her identity as the underestimated outsider. She was about to become a West Point cadet, one of approximately 1,200 young people selected from over 15,000 applicants. West Point exceeded every expectation Sarah had formed during her years of research and preparation. The Gothic architecture, the Hudson River setting, the weight of history that seemed to permeate every building. It was overwhelming and inspiring in equal measure. This was where Eisenhower, MacArthur, and Patton had trained. This was where she would forge herself into the leader she was meant to become. Beast Barracks lived up to its fearsome reputation. The 6 weeks of intensive military training were designed to break down civilian habits and build military discipline. Cadets were subjected to constant stress, physical challenges, and mental pressure that pushed many to their breaking points. For Sarah, Beast was simultaneously the hardest and most natural thing she had ever experienced. The physical demands were brutal, but her years of self-imposed conditioning had prepared her body. The mental pressure was intense, but her experience with years of social rejection had taught her to persevere through psychological discomfort. What surprised her most was how naturally military leadership came to her. While other new cadets struggled to adapt to the rigid hierarchy and structure, Sarah seemed to instinctively understand the rhythm and logic of military organization. Her years of studying military history and leadership principles paid dividends as she quickly grasped concepts that confused her peers. "Martinez, you've done this before?" asked Cadet Sergeant Williams, one of the upperclassmen responsible for training the new cadets. "No, Sergeant. First time." "You sure about that? You're picking this up faster than cadets who came from military schools." Sarah's performance during Beast Barracks earned her recognition from the cadre and respect from her fellow new cadets. Many of her classmates came from military families or prestigious prep schools, but none of them had her combination of natural aptitude and desperate hunger for success. The academic year that followed was equally challenging. West Point's curriculum was rigorous, combining traditional college coursework with military subjects and leadership development. Sarah's learning disability, which had been granted a waiver for admission, required her to work harder than most cadets to keep up academically. But she had advantages that weren't immediately apparent. Her years of struggling with dyslexia had taught her how to learn despite obstacles. She had developed study techniques and mental discipline that many of her academically gifted classmates lacked. When coursework became difficult, she simply worked harder and longer than everyone else. Her roommate, Jennifer Chun, came from a family of doctors in California and had been valedictorian of her high school class. "Sarah, what do you do it?" Jennifer asked one night as she watched Sarah work through a particularly difficult engineering problem for the 3rd time. "Do what?" "You spend twice as long on homework as anyone else, but you never seem frustrated or overwhelmed." "I get stressed out if I don't understand something immediately." "I guess I'm used to not understanding things immediately," Sarah replied with a laugh. "I've been working harder than everyone else for so long that it feels normal now." This work ethic, combined with her natural leadership abilities, quickly distinguished Sarah among the cadet corps. She was selected for leadership positions earlier and more frequently than typical cadets. Her tactical officers noted her ability to remain calm under pressure and to inspire confidence in subordinates. But Sarah's greatest strength was her understanding of what it meant to be underestimated. She could connect with struggling cadets in ways that her more privileged classmates couldn't. When a cadet from rural Mississippi was having difficulty with academic work, Sarah spent hours helping him develop better study techniques. When a cadet from inner-city Detroit felt overwhelmed by the social dynamics of West Point, Sarah shared her own experiences of being an outsider. "You know what I learned in high school?" Sarah told the struggling cadet. "The people who write you off are doing you a favor. They're showing you that you can't rely on their approval or support. You have to build your own strength." These relationships with fellow cadets became the foundation of Sarah's leadership philosophy. She understood that true leadership wasn't about commanding from a position of privilege. It was about lifting others up and helping them discover their own capabilities. By the end of her first year, Sarah had established herself as one of the top cadets in her class. Her grades were strong, her military performance was exemplary, and her leadership potential was evident to everyone around her. More importantly, she had found her place in an institution that valued the qualities she had been developing for years. The summer between her first and second year brought her first taste of real military training beyond the academy grounds. She was selected for Cadet Field Training, a program that exposed cadets to various branches of the Army and gave them hands-on experience with military operations. Sarah chose to spend her summer with an airborne infantry unit stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It was an unusual choice for a female cadet, but Sarah was drawn to the challenge and the opportunity to prove herself in one of the Army's most demanding environments. The paratroopers at Fort Bragg were initially skeptical of the West Point cadet assigned to their unit. Many had negative preconceptions about academy cadets, viewing them as privileged college students playing at being soldiers. Sarah's background and work ethic quickly changed their minds. "This cadet's different," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez told his platoon leader after watching Sarah volunteer for every difficult assignment and refused to accept special treatment because of her gender or academy status. "She's got that hunger that you can't teach." Sarah thrived in the high-intensity environment of the airborne infantry. She completed jump school, earned her paratrooper wings, and impressed the seasoned NCOs with her willingness to learn and her refusal to quit under pressure. More importantly, she gained invaluable experience working with enlisted soldiers, the backbone of the Army. When she returned to West Point for her second year, Sarah brought with her a deeper understanding of military culture and a growing reputation among both cadets and faculty. She was selected for increasingly important leadership positions and began to develop the network of relationships that would serve her throughout her military career. But Sarah never forgot where she came from or the lessons she had learned during her years as an outsider. She maintained her connection to her mother through weekly phone calls and letters, and she never lost sight of the bigger picture. West Point was not about personal glory. It was about preparing to serve her country and lead soldiers in defense of freedom and democracy. As her second year progressed, Sarah began to look ahead to branch selection, the process by which cadets chose their career fields within the Army. Most female cadets gravitated toward support branches like logistics, intelligence, or military police. But Sarah had her sights set on combat arms, specifically infantry or armor. "Martinez, have you considered intelligence or signal corps?" her academic advisor asked during a counseling session. "Your analytical abilities and academic performance would serve you well in those fields." "Sir, I appreciate the suggestion, but I want to be where the action is. I want to lead soldiers in the most challenging environments the Army has to offer." Her advisor looked uncomfortable. "You understand that combat arms branches are still predominantly male, and the culture can be challenging for female officers." Sarah smiled. "Sir, I've been dealing with challenging environments my entire life. I think I can handle it." By her third year, Sarah had established herself as one of the top cadets in her class and a rising star in the Corps of Cadets. She was selected as a company commander, one of the most prestigious leadership positions available to cadets. Her subordinates respected her combination of high standards and genuine care for their development. But more importantly, she had begun to develop her own leadership philosophy based on her unique experiences. She understood that real strength came from overcoming adversity, that true leadership meant serving others rather than commanding them, and that the greatest victories often came from proving wrong those who had underestimated you. The girl who had been dismissed as the class loser was becoming the kind of leader that armies needed, someone who understood struggle, who could connect with soldiers from all backgrounds, and who never gave up when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. But West Point was just the beginning. Sarah had bigger goals, larger dreams that extended far beyond the academy grounds. She was building herself into something that her high school classmates could never have imagined, and she was just getting started. The foundation was in place. Now it was time to build the career that would shock everyone who thought they knew her limitations. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez graduated from West Point in the top 10% of her class, commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army Infantry. The choice of infantry was groundbreaking. She was among the first group of female officers to be assigned to combat arms following the military's decision to open all positions to women. But Sarah didn't choose infantry to make a political statement. She chose it because she wanted to lead soldiers in the most demanding and important missions the Army had to offer. Her first assignment was with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, the same unit where she had spent a transformative summer as a cadet. Now she was returning as a platoon leader, responsible for 32 paratroopers in one of the Army's most elite units. The transition from cadet to officer was challenging for everyone, but Sarah faced additional obstacles as one of the first female infantry officers in the division's history. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we've never had a female infantry officer before," said Sergeant First Class Martinez, no relation, despite sharing a surname, during their first meeting. Some of the soldiers might need time to adjust. Sarah looked at her platoon sergeant, a 19-year veteran with 3 combat deployments and more experience than most officers would ever accumulate. She knew that earning his respect and trust was crucial to her success as a leader. "Sergeant Martinez, I'm not here to change the infantry or make a statement about gender integration. I'm here to lead soldiers and accomplish missions. If I do my job well, the rest will take care of itself." The sergeant studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Roger that, ma'am. Let's see what you've got." What Sarah had was an unshakable work ethic, a deep understanding of soldier psychology, and a leadership style forged through years of overcoming adversity. She approached every challenge with the same methodical determination that had carried her from the bottom of her high school's social hierarchy to the ranks of Army officers. Her first few months were a careful balancing act. She needed to establish her authority and credibility while building trust with soldiers who were naturally skeptical of any new officer, let alone a female infantry officer. Sarah's strategy was simple. She would outwork everyone, accept no special treatment, and demonstrate her competence through action rather than words. She was the first to arrive at physical training every morning and the last to leave the field during training exercises. She carried her own equipment, refused assistance with heavy loads, and never complained about discomfort or exhaustion. When her soldiers struggled with marksmanship, she spent her weekends at the shooting range helping them improve. When they had family problems, she connected them with appropriate resources and support systems. "Lieutenant Martinez is solid," Sergeant Martinez reported to the company commander after 3 months. "The soldiers trust her because she trusts them. She doesn't try to prove anything except that she cares about their success." This approach paid dividends when Sarah's platoon was selected for a combat deployment to Afghanistan. The war had been ongoing for over a decade, but the mission remained dangerous and complex. Sarah would be leading soldiers in actual combat operations, where her decisions could mean the difference between life and death for the people under her command. The deployment was everything Sarah had trained for and more. Afghanistan presented challenges that no classroom or training exercise could fully prepare officers to handle. She was responsible for her soldiers' lives in an environment where threats could come from any direction, where cultural misunderstandings could escalate into deadly confrontations, and where split-second decisions carried enormous consequences. Sarah's first combat action came during a patrol in a disputed area of Kandahar province. Her platoon was conducting a reconnaissance mission when they came under fire from insurgents positioned in a nearby building complex. The firefight lasted 45 minutes and tested every aspect of Sarah's leadership and training. "Martinez, we need to flank left and suppress that position," she radioed to her platoon sergeant while maintaining fire discipline and keeping track of her soldiers' positions and ammunition status. "Roger, Mom." "Moving now," came the reply. Sarah coordinated artillery support, managed casualty evacuation procedures, and maintained communication with higher headquarters while personally directing her soldiers' tactical movements. When the firefight ended with no friendly casualties and the insurgent position neutralized, her soldiers looked at their lieutenant with new respect. "Ma'am, you kept your cool under fire," said Private First Class Jackson, a 19-year-old from Alabama who had been among the most skeptical of female leadership. "I wasn't sure what to expect, but you handled that like a veteran." The combat deployment lasted 15 months and included dozens of patrols, several major operations, and constant exposure to danger. Sarah's leadership was tested repeatedly, and she never failed to meet the challenge. Her platoon became known throughout the battalion for their professionalism, effectiveness, and esprit de corps. More importantly, Sarah was learning lessons about leadership under pressure that would serve her throughout her career. She discovered that her background as an underestimated outsider actually gave her advantages in understanding soldier psychology. Many of her troops came from backgrounds similar to her own: working-class families, limited opportunities, and experiences with being dismissed by society's elites. "Lieutenant, you get us," Specialist Rodriguez told her during a quiet moment between missions. "A lot of officers try to understand soldiers, but you actually do. You know what it's like to have people count you out." This connection with enlisted soldiers became Sarah's greatest strength as a leader. She never forgot that her job was to serve them, not the other way around. She fought for their promotions, defended them when they made mistakes, and ensured they received the training and resources they needed to be successful. When the deployment ended, Sarah's performance evaluations were outstanding. Her battalion commander recommended her for early promotion and selection for advanced military education. But Sarah was already thinking bigger, planning the career progression that would take her to the highest levels of military leadership. "Sarah, you have incredible potential," Colonel Henderson told her during her deployment debrief. "Have you considered your long-term career goals? Advanced civil schooling, command, and general staff college?" "Sir, I want to command at every level, company, battalion, brigade, and beyond. I want to be in a position to influence military policy and strategy at the highest levels." Colonel Henderson smiled. "That's ambitious. Very ambitious. But if anyone can do it, it's probably you." Sarah's next assignment was as a company commander, responsible for approximately 150 soldiers and their families. This was a significant step up in responsibility and visibility, and her success would largely determine her potential for future promotion and advancement. Command of Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 508th Infantry Regiment came at a challenging time. The unit was dealing with post-deployment reintegration issues, including several soldiers struggling with combat-related stress and family problems. Sarah's predecessor had been relieved of command following several incidents that had damaged unit morale and readiness. Alpha Company needs a leader who can rebuild trust and refocus the soldiers on their mission, the battalion commander explained during Sarah's change of command briefing. "The company has good soldiers, but they've lost confidence in their leadership." Sarah approached company command with the same systematic determination she had applied to every challenge in her career. She spent her first month conducting one-on-one counseling sessions with every soldier in the company, listening to their concerns and developing individual development plans for each person. She discovered that many of the unit's problems stemmed from soldiers feeling disconnected from their leadership and uncertain about their future in the Army. Some were struggling with financial problems, others with family issues, and many simply felt like their contributions weren't valued or recognized. "Here's what we're going to do," Sarah announced during her first company formation. "We're going to rebuild this unit from the ground up based on trust, competence, and mutual respect. Every soldier in this company matters, and every soldier has something valuable to contribute. My job is to help you discover what that is and give you the tools to be successful." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was steady and unmistakable. Sarah implemented new training programs focused on individual skill development. She established mentorship programs, pairing experienced soldiers with newer ones. She fought with higher headquarters to secure better equipment and facilities for her company. Most importantly, she created a culture where soldiers felt valued and heard. She held regular coffee talks, where any soldier could discuss concerns or suggestions in an informal setting. She made herself available for counseling and guidance, often staying late to help soldiers with personal problems or career planning. "Captain Martinez saved my Army career," Staff Sergeant Thompson told a visiting general during an inspection. "When she took command, I was ready to get out. I felt like nobody cared about soldiers anymore. But she showed me that good leadership still exists in the Army." Alpha Company's turnaround became a model for other units in the division. Their readiness rates improved dramatically. Their soldiers' morale and retention rates were among the highest in the battalion, and their performance during training exercises consistently exceeded standards. Sarah's success as a company commander led to selection for the Army's Command and General Staff College, an intermediate-level education program for rising officers. She was also chosen for a master's degree program in international relations at Georgetown University, combining military education with civilian academic credentials. The year in Washington, D.C. was transformative for Sarah's understanding of national security and military strategy. She studied under professors who had served in senior government positions and alongside fellow officers who were similarly destined for senior leadership roles. She wrote her thesis on military leadership in counterinsurgency operations, drawing from her combat experiences and academic research. But perhaps more importantly, she began to develop the strategic thinking and political acumen that would be essential for senior military leadership. She attended conferences on defense policy, participated in war games and strategic planning exercises, and began to understand how military operations fit into broader national objectives. Captain Martinez has the intellectual capacity and strategic vision for senior leadership, her academic advisor wrote in her final evaluation. Her combination of combat experience, educational achievement, and demonstrated leadership ability makes her a prime candidate for battalion and brigade command. Sarah's next assignment was as the executive officer of a battalion scheduled for deployment to Iraq. As the second in command of an 800-soldier organization, she would be responsible for all aspects of unit operations and preparation for combat. The Iraq deployment was different from her previous experience in Afghanistan. The mission focused more on training Iraqi security forces and conducting stability operations in a complex urban environment. Sarah's role required her to coordinate with Iraqi military officers, civilian contractors, and international coalition partners. Her ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds proved invaluable. She developed strong working relationships with Iraqi officers who initially were skeptical of taking orders from an American female officer. Her approach was respectful but firm, acknowledging cultural differences while maintaining professional standards. Major Martinez understands that leadership transcends cultural boundaries, observed an Iraqi colonel during a joint planning session. She treats our officers as partners, not subordinates, but she never compromises on mission requirements or professional standards. The deployment was successful by every measure. No soldiers lost, mission objectives achieved, and Iraqi security forces significantly improved in capability and confidence. Sarah's performance as executive officer earned her promotion to lieutenant colonel and selection for battalion command, the pinnacle of tactical leadership in the Army. Command of 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment represented the highest honor Sarah could achieve at the tactical level. The Rangers were the Army's premier special operations infantry unit, and selection for Ranger Command was reserved for the most exceptional officers. Sarah was the first female officer ever selected to command a Ranger battalion. "Ma'am, the Rangers have a proud tradition and high standards," the regimental commander told her during the change of command ceremony. "We selected you because we believe you can maintain and enhance that tradition while leading the regiment into the future." The pressure was immense. Sarah was commanding soldiers who were among the best in the world, conducting missions that were classified and often dangerous. Any failure would be magnified because of her historic position as the first female Ranger Battalion commander. But Sarah had been preparing for this moment her entire career. She understood that leadership at this level required a different approach, less hands-on management, more strategic vision, and organizational leadership. She focused on developing her subordinate leaders, ensuring they had the resources and authority needed to accomplish their missions. "The colonel trusts us to do our jobs," one of her company commanders told his soldiers. "She gives us clear guidance and then gets out of our way." That's the kind of leadership that makes units successful. Under Sarah's command, the Ranger Battalion achieved exceptional performance ratings and was selected for the most challenging special operations missions. Her soldiers' respect for her leadership was evident in their performance and their willingness to follow her anywhere. But Sarah was already thinking beyond battalion command. She had her sights set on the very top of the military hierarchy, and she was systematically building the credentials and experience necessary to reach those heights. The girl who had been mocked as the class loser was becoming one of the Army's most promising leaders. But her journey was far from over. She was approaching the 10-year mark since high school graduation, and she had received an invitation to her class reunion. The timing was perfect. She was between assignments, having just completed her successful command of the Ranger Battalion and awaiting notification of her next posting. For the first time since leaving Westfield, Sarah decided she would return home to show her former classmates exactly what someone like her could accomplish. The reunion invitation arrived at Sarah's quarters at Fort Benning on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Westfield High School class of 2008 to 10-year reunion. It read in cheerful script above a photo of their old school building. Sarah stared at the invitation for a long moment, remembering the last time she had walked those hallways as the mocked and dismissed class loser. A lot had changed in 10 years. Sarah was now Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, recently completed command of the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, and recipient of notification that would shock everyone who thought they knew her story. 3 days after receiving the reunion invitation, she got the call that would change everything. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, this is General Patricia Hayes from the Pentagon. I need you to report to Washington immediately for a classified briefing regarding your next assignment. Sarah had been expecting orders to the War College or perhaps a staff position at the Pentagon. What she received was something far more extraordinary and completely unprecedented in military history. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, General Hayes began as Sarah sat in a secure briefing room deep within the Pentagon. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels and represents a complete departure from normal military promotion procedures. Sarah listened with growing amazement as General Hayes explained the situation. A joint CIA-Pentagon deep cover operation, years in the making, had created a completely fabricated military record for Sarah that showed her being promoted through the ranks at an accelerated pace while conducting classified special operations around the world. The operation was designed to insert her into a hostile nation as a high-ranking American military official for an intelligence mission of critical national importance. The cover story shows you being promoted to colonel, then brigadier general, major general, lieutenant general, and finally to full general, 4 stars, over the past 3 years while conducting black operations in classified locations. According to your fabricated record, you're now one of the youngest 4-star generals in American history and one of the most decorated combat commanders of your generation. Sarah's head was spinning. Ma'am, I don't understand. Why me? And why such an elaborate cover story? 2 reasons, Lieutenant Colonel. First, you have exactly the right combination of real combat experience, demonstrated leadership ability, and personal characteristics we need for this mission. Second, your background makes you the perfect candidate for deep cover work. Nobody from your past would ever suspect that someone they knew as the class loser could actually be a 4-star general. The irony was almost too perfect. Sarah's history of being underestimated, the very thing that had made her high school years so painful, was now her greatest operational asset. People's preconceptions about who she was and what she was capable of achieving would provide the perfect cover for her real mission. The mission requires you to attend social events and gatherings where you'll encounter people from your past, General Hayes continued. Your cover story must be absolutely believable, which means you need to inhabit this identity completely. For the next 6 months, you are General Sarah Martinez, recipient of multiple combat decorations, commander of classified special operations units, and one of the most senior officers in the United States Army. Sarah was fitted with a complete wardrobe of general officer uniforms, including dress blues with ribbons and decorations that told the story of an extraordinary military career. The fabricated awards included multiple Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, a Distinguished Service Cross, and commendations from coalition partners around the world. She was briefed on the fictional operations she had supposedly led and the classified missions that had earned her rapid promotion. But the most stunning part of the cover story was what it said about her recent activities. According to the fabricated record, General Martinez had just returned from a year-long classified assignment in the Middle East where she had commanded a joint special operations task force credited with eliminating several high-value terrorist targets. Her success had made her a legend within the special operations community and had caught the attention of the highest levels of government. The beauty of this cover, her CIA handler explained during one of many briefing sessions, is that it's just believable enough to be true. You have the real military experience and demonstrated competence to make people believe you could have achieved this level of success. The rapid promotions can be explained by the classified nature of your operations and the military's need for exceptional leaders in the war on terrorism. The reunion was scheduled for Saturday night at the Westfield Country Club, the most prestigious venue in their small town. Sarah had exactly 2 weeks to prepare for what would essentially be the most important acting performance of her life. She needed to convince people who had known her as a teenager that she had become one of the most powerful military officers in America. She spent hours studying the fictional operations she had supposedly commanded, memorizing details about classified missions and special operations units that existed only in the fabricated files. She practiced wearing the general's uniform until it felt natural, learned the protocols for how others should address her, and developed the bearing and confidence that people would expect from someone of her supposed rank. But, perhaps most importantly, she prepared psychologically for encountering the people who had made her teenage years miserable. Sarah had long since moved beyond any desire for revenge or vindication, but she couldn't deny a certain satisfaction in the way this assignment had worked out. Remember, her handler reminded her during final preparations, "You're not Sarah Martinez, the former class outcast. You're General Martinez, one of the most decorated and respected officers in the United States military. You need to believe it completely, because everyone else needs to believe it too." The night of the reunion arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies. Sarah drove to the country club in a rented black sedan, wearing her dress blue uniform with 4 stars gleaming on her shoulders and rows of ribbons covering her chest. She had never felt more confident or more nervous at the same time. The Westfield Country Club had been transformed for the reunion, with decorations in the old-school colors and displays of photographs from their high school years. Sarah paused for a moment in the parking lot, looking at the building where she was about to face her past as someone completely different from who she had been. Her entrance was carefully timed for maximum impact. She arrived about an hour after the event had started, when most classmates would already be there and the initial excitement of seeing old friends would be settling into more casual conversations. She wanted her appearance to be noticed by everyone. The reaction was everything she could have hoped for and more. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people noticed the military officer walking through the door. It took several moments for recognition to set in. The woman in the general's uniform looked familiar, but surely it couldn't be. "Oh my God," someone whispered loud enough to be heard across the room. "Is that Sarah Martinez?" "That's 4 stars," another voice said with awe. "She's a 4-star general." The reunion fell silent as Sarah walked across the room with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. She wore the uniform with natural authority, and the decorations on her chest told a story of extraordinary service and achievement. This was not the awkward, dismissed teenager they remembered. This was someone who commanded respect and attention wherever she went. Madison Campbell, now Madison Walsh, married to a local businessman, was standing near the bar when she saw Sarah. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and, finally, something approaching shock. The woman she had tormented as the class loser was now wearing more authority and prestige than Madison could ever dream of achieving. "Sarah?" Madison approached hesitantly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to speak to someone of such obvious importance. "Sarah Martinez? Is it really you?" "Hello, Madison," Sarah replied with a warm smile that contained no trace of the insecurity or pain that had defined their high school relationship. "It's good to see you again." "Oh, wow. I mean, you're a general? Like, an actual general?" 4 stars, confirmed Jake Reynolds, who had approached with his usual swagger, somewhat diminished by the obvious importance of the person he was addressing. "Jesus, Sarah, I had no idea." Word spread quickly through the reunion that Sarah Martinez, the weird military girl, the class outcast, the target of countless jokes and cruel comments, was now one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Army. People who had never spoken to her in high school were suddenly eager to renew old friendships. Classmates who had dismissed her dreams as fantasy were struggling to reconcile their memories with the accomplished woman before them. "General Martinez," said Mrs. Peterson, their former guidance counselor, who had suggested Sarah consider vocational training instead of college. "I have to say, when you told me you wanted to attend West Point, I never imagined. I mean, this is just incredible." Sarah accepted congratulations and answered questions about her military career with the grace and humility expected of a senior officer. She was careful to stay in character, referring to classified operations she couldn't discuss in detail and speaking with the authority of someone who had commanded thousands of soldiers in combat. I've been very fortunate to serve with exceptional people and to be given opportunities to lead in challenging situations, she explained to a group of fascinated classmates. The military has been good to me, and I've tried to give back by taking care of the soldiers under my command. The evening became a parade of people who wanted to be associated with Sarah's success. Former classmates who had ignored or mocked her now hung on every word, eager to claim some connection to her achievement. Teachers who had underestimated her apologized for not recognizing her potential. Even the popular kids who had made her life miserable seemed desperate for her approval and friendship. Madison was particularly eager to repair their relationship. Sarah, I hope you know that we were all just kids back then. I always knew you were special, even if I didn't express it very well. It was a complete rewriting of history, but Sarah accepted it graciously. Her mission required her to be friendly and approachable, and besides, she genuinely felt no animosity toward these people anymore. Their cruelty had shaped her, but it had ultimately made her stronger. High school was a long time ago, Madison. We were all figuring out who we were going to become. The reunion organizers asked Sarah to say a few words to the assembled group, and she accepted the invitation. Standing before her former classmates, some successful, some struggling, all of them older and hopefully wiser than they had been as teenagers, she spoke about the importance of perseverance and the danger of underestimating people based on their current circumstances. 10 years ago, I was probably not who you expected to become a 4-star general, she said with a slight smile. I was awkward, I struggled academically, and I definitely didn't fit in with the popular crowd. But I learned something important during those years, that other people's opinions about your potential don't determine your future. You do. The applause was genuine and sustained. Many of her classmates seemed genuinely moved by her words and her example. Some approached her afterward to apologize for their behavior in high school or to express admiration for how far she had come. General, I owe you an apology, said Tommy Morrison, who had been one of Jake's friends and frequent participants in the mockery of Sarah's military interests. We were jerks to you in school, and I've regretted it for years. Seeing what you've accomplished, I'm just really impressed and really sorry. Sarah's response was gracious and genuine. Tommy, we all made mistakes in high school. What matters is who we've become since then. As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself surrounded by people who wanted photos with her, contact information for future networking, and stories to tell about their famous classmate. The transformation was complete. She had gone from class outcast to the most celebrated member of their graduating class. But the most satisfying moment came when she was preparing to leave. Madison approached her one final time, this time alone and seemingly more genuine than she had been earlier. Sarah, can I ask you something? What was it like proving everyone wrong? Because that's what you did. You proved all of us wrong about who you were and what you were capable of. Sarah considered the question carefully. Madison, I didn't do this to prove anyone wrong. I did it because I believed I had something to contribute to my country and to the soldiers I've been privileged to lead. The opinions of people from high school never factored into my decisions or my motivation. It was the perfect answer for her mission and also completely true to who Sarah had become. She had risen above the need for validation from the people who had once dismissed her. Her achievements were their own reward, and her success spoke for itself. As Sarah drove away from the reunion, she reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. The mission she was about to undertake would require her to maintain this fictional identity for months, convincing hostile foreign agents that she was indeed the powerful general she appeared to be. But tonight had been perfect preparation. If she could convince her former classmates that the class loser had become a 4-star general, she could convince anyone. Her phone buzzed with a message from her CIA handler. Mission Phase 1 complete. Report for briefing Monday, 0800. Outstanding work, General. Sarah smiled at the title. For the next 6 months, she really would be General Martinez, and she would carry that identity with the same determination and excellence that had defined her real military career. The girl who had been mocked for dreaming of military greatness was now living a dream that exceeded even her own ambitious expectations. But this was just another mission, another challenge to overcome. When it was complete, she would return to her real career as Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, using this experience to continue her genuine rise through the military ranks. The reunion had been a satisfying reminder of how far she had come. But Sarah was always looking forward, not backward. The class loser had become something far more impressive than even a 4-star general. She had become someone who could become anyone she needed to be in service to her country. And that was